Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you've ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. Since 2009, our radio program hosted guest experts from around the globe sharing their perspectives, experiences, and expertise while giving you food for thought. If you can't listen live, then download and listen to any of our 300-plus podcasts in our library at texasconflictcoach.com. So sit back, relax, or join the conversation every Tuesday evening, or tweet us at TXConflictCoach.
Well, welcome to our special episode of Cyber Week, the 17th annual virtual conference dedicated to the innovations and developments in online dispute resolution. Now, Cyber Week is sponsored by the Warner Institute and a number of collaborators, including ADR Hub, Internet Bar Organization, Modria, and others. The Texas Conflict Coach radio show is honored to be part of this annual event for our 4th year. Now, this episode focuses on tech for justice, using technology to expand access to justice, and we have with us David, Slayton, and Jeff Aresty. Now, many of us have said that the judiciary often trails the private sector in its use of technology. Courts have been attempting to close this gap, but need the help of the technology sector to succeed. We will discuss how the technology sector can get involved and what plans they have for hacking for justice in Austin, Texas. So we have two guests. Our first guest is David Slayton, who began serving in his current position as the Administrative Director for the Texas Office of Court Administration in 2012. Prior to this position, Mr. Slayton served as the Director of Court Administration for the Lubbock County District Courts and the County Courts at Law for 8 years. He has been employed by the judicial branch in various roles for over 15 years. Mr. Slayton earned a bachelor's of degree in political science from Texas Tech University and a master's degree in public administration from Troy University. He currently serves as the immediate past president of the National Association of Court Management's Board and was formerly the secretary on the board of directors for the Texas Association for Drug Court Professionals. Actually, his bio goes on for quite a bit of experience, and you can find all of his full bio at texasconflictcoach.com. Our second guest, also with a large depth of experience, is Jeff Aresty, who is a Massachusetts lawyer based in Houston, Texas, and he's been involved in international business law and the role of technology in the transformation of the practice of law for almost 3 decades. Mr. Aresty is the founder and current president of the Internet Bar Organization, or IBO, whose mission is to use the Internet to promote legal and economic justice for all people. Now, additionally, Mr. Aresty is a fellow at the Center for Information Technology and Dispute Resolution at the University of Massachusetts. His involvement in the center centers on promoting the use of online dispute resolution technology as an alternate to traditional methods. His ongoing law technology activities concern e-lawyering training, including ODR, and initiating global law reform in online communities. He's co-edited 2 books on cross-cultural influence in international business and e-commerce for the ABA, including the ABA Guide to International Business Negotiations. In his position as the reporter for the ABA's e-lawyering task force, Mr. Aresty wrote several articles on the technical, legal, and practical implications of the practice of law in cyberspace. Again, you can read their full bios at the TexasConflictCoach.com. And we do have our chat room open tonight at blogtalkradio.com/Texas-conflict-coach. Just scroll down, you'll see the chat room, and we encourage you, as part of our Cyber Week, to type your comments or questions. And we have our Twitter chat going, and we're using the hashtag CyberWeek, CYBERWEEK, and you can also communicate with us that way as well. So let's get to it. Jeff and David, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here, Patty.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Patty. Super.
Yes, I mean, Jeff, you're so involved in Cyber Week. That's been going on all week with moderated discussion forums, demonstrations of mediation rooms, contests, webinars, and of course our radio program. And so it's been a very active week for a lot of people, and I'm glad that we could again be part of it. This was fourth time around for us, but certainly not new to the two of you. So let's get right into our topic and start off with the identifying the problem, and that is this lack of access to the justice system for many who are vulnerable and powerless, if you would. And so can you say more about this population group and this lack of access?
Sure, Patty. This is David Slayton, and I'm really glad to be here and share a little bit about this issue. And there's a significant amount of the population in this country and in the state of Texas in particular as well who just can't afford a lawyer. And so it becomes an issue of these individuals needing access to the courts and oftentimes not having that access. Just to give you a little bit of a flavor for Texas, in fiscal year 13, a year ago or so, about 16.5% of the individuals who were filing cases and family law cases represented themselves. This doesn't even count the number of individuals who are responding in those cases, but 16.5%. And that number over the last 3 years has gone up by 1% per year. That's statewide. There are some places in our state where the number is as high as 40%, and then if you look around the country, numbers as high as even 80% of individuals representing themselves in court. So obviously it's a significant amount of the population who are seeking the courts by themselves. At the same time, we know that legal aid providers, through the efforts of individuals who are offering to assist these individuals, we know the statistics show us and that they're only meeting about 20% of the needs. So individuals who qualify by their financial qualifications as individuals who don't have the resources to afford a lawyer, legal aid only has the capacity to actually handle 20% of those. So 80% of those people who even qualify have issues accessing the courts. So, these vulnerable people, you might think, you might have in your mind a stereotype of what these people are, but these are individuals in our country who are veterans, other individuals who might be targets of domestic violence or just powerless in some way. And so those individuals could be people who just don't have the financial capacity nor the power to get to the court. Individuals, some of them may even have some resources, but maybe not enough to access the courts. An example of that might be someone who's an elderly person who is maybe lost capacity and doesn't have the capacity to actually represent themselves and maybe has a guardian. So there's a lot of people out there attempting to access our court system for various reasons, and many times just have difficulty actually making that access happen.
And let me clarify, David, from what you were saying, is the assumption here in this problem that access is just financial, meaning they can't afford a lawyer, so therefore they can't access? Because I imagine it's something more than just that.
Yeah, a lot of times it's, just understanding how to, maybe even how to actually access the court system. So obviously if they are on the fringe of even financial abilities, the court system, of course, is very difficult for many people who aren't trained to even know actually how to access it, how to file the documents, how to get into court. And so that's part of the issue we face with individuals too, is actually access not just financially, but also just having the means to be able to know how to navigate the system, whether that be through a lawyer or in their own trying to represent themselves.
That's really a great point David just made, and it goes even beyond that, Patty, in that many times the American Bar Foundation just pointed this out this past summer in a research report. A lot of people don't even know that the problems that they have are justiciable, that if they did have access to the courts or to legal institutions in some fashion, that they have a problem that could be solved there. Those numbers are huge numbers. So part of it is an education problem. This is really where the judges, the legal aid organizations, lawyers all have an opportunity to what we call build the justice layer of the Internet, and then in part get that message out. Just by way of example, look at what's happened in banking in attempting to deal with a similar population of people that we've talked about. We all know that there are lots of banks, lots of banking services, but what about the people that don't have access to those banking services? The banking sector and the non-banking sector has worked extensively to reach out to provide services in alternative ways, using technology, using phones. In other countries, even, you really have the telecommunications sector that has become the non-bank that allows people to move money through their phones. So the justice system has a way to go, but in doing so, we have an opportunity to reach out to the population David refers to, educate them as well as educate those of us who are in the justice system to use new tools.
So let's talk then and clarify about this justice system, because I think when people hear the word justice or justice system, they might think it's, limited to, judges and arbitrators and lawyers. So what do you mean by justice, and why is it important for our listener to understand that?
I think you raise a good point there. I think people immediately, when they think of the justice system, think those are the people who work at the courthouse. And the justice system, from our perspective, is much broader than that. This includes really anyone who interacts with the judiciary or the legal system altogether. It's mediators, it's lawyers, it's judges, and really it's anyone who's working in the system. It could be guardians, could be there's so many people that are working in and around the justice system and that the judiciary, and those are really individuals who are part of the system. And the key here is that we've got to have everybody who's a part of the system and to be working together to really come up with, leverage the best resources that we can get from all of them, so that we can be able to have people having adequate access and being able to take care of their problems in the system. And part of this is, as Jeff pointed out, really trying to make sure we educate more people about what the needs are in the system and how people can get involved. There may be people even outside the justice system, and that's a little bit about, I know we're going to be talking about later on in the show, about how we think that people can get more involved in this. And it's really about making sure that all those that are involved, even tangentially, know that they have a role to play in making the system better.
One of the things that you asked, Patty, is the justice, who's involved in the justice system. It might be useful to mention what we mean by justice itself, because a lot of people do think, as David points out, that the justice system is really defined by the legal institutions and the people who are associated with them. But when we're talking about justice, we really are talking about the opportunity to create rights and the opportunity to enforce those rights once you've created them. And so many people at this point have the opportunity to create rights because new entities are beginning to emerge that are becoming part of the justice system. So when you think about organizations like LegalZoom or like Rocket Lawyer, they are going out and providing a tremendous amount of information that isn't coming through the traditional legal entities that we would expect to do the training. And they're helping people to understand how to create rights. Earlier this week, I watched an organization called Brave.org talk about cyberbullying, and they have this incredibly interesting program that they were showing where they're gamifying how people can understand the issue of cyberbullying and how to get people surrounded around the issue of resolving those issues at an early stage before they turn into real problems. So one of the groups that David has begun to bring in to the justice system are the technologists. And that's really an incredibly unique brand of people that are not only interested in technology, but also in the new business models that are going to be supporting that kind of technology. And so really we're working with different groups, digital immigrants such as myself, people who learned about technology over the course of our lifetime. And now we're dealing with the digital natives who are, the 20-year-olds and younger who grew up with the technology and They are just putting new kinds of information out there every day. So we have all kinds of people who are interested in justice who are coming in to help build this justice layer of the Internet.
So let's talk about technology then, because I think what I'm hearing you say is that your proposed path forward, if you will, for addressing this problem, being able to have access, and not only having access, but how do we have access, how do we actually do it, educating people about that. So I'm assuming technology obviously is a huge part of it. So talk more about how you see technology being used to address this problem.
Well, let me start with an example, maybe a story of an issue that we've seen technology address a problem recently, and it's still sort of developing, but one of the issues that we have in the foster care system where children enter the foster care system for whatever reason is that many times these children, because of the fact that they may get moved around from different home to different home, that they end up not being able to maintain their critically important documents, such as maybe their birth certificate or something else along those lines. And then, of course, that affects their ability to, get into college or apply for jobs or other things where they may need that type of identification. And so one of the things that a few months ago a group looked at is how can we use technology to address that. And so the technology providers came together, individuals who really thought this through and came up with an approach on how to provide a secure system to maintain that information for the foster care children, and that system is in the progress of being developed at this time. So, taking problems that we know exist in the system, as simple as that one, and addressing it in a way that we know technology can take care of it. And maybe before technology was around, maybe we'd say we were going to have a huge filing cabinet somewhere where kids would have to come and try to find it, and obviously that's not a great way of dealing with things. And so, we can really leverage the resources of technology to help us with some pretty complex problems that really affect people's lives, and that's really what we're proposing to do with the technology going forward, and looking at all the different issues that exist in the judicial system, in the justice system, and saying, is there a way, technology may not solve every issue, but is there a way to leverage the resources we have out there in technology to really address the problems and make it better for the people that we're trying to serve?
So are you saying that the technology does exist then for the various problems that you're referring to, the foster being one?
I think, and Jeff can add on here, but one of the things I think is that maybe the technology is out there, but the technology has not been developed for the specific problems we're talking about. So, and maybe there's even some things out there that we don't even know how to address, but yet someone from a technology perspective could look at it and say, oh, well, here's an easy way. I mean, you look at now what we did with these foster care children's issue, and you think, well, of course, that's a no-brainer. That's an easy thing we should have done, but yet, that was a challenge that existed, that if someone wouldn't have stopped and said, how can we use technology to address this and really involve the technology sector in the justice system, we wouldn't have thought about that. So, I think it's out there, and many times we just need to figure out how to leverage it to address the problems. And where it doesn't exist, we need to encourage the technology sector to really help us think outside the box and how to address things.
A lot of the efforts that the existing justice system have focused on when it comes to technology have been to make it easier to access the existing systems through technologies like electronic filing, or in the court cases themselves, technologies like electronic discovery or access to legal research that's online. And in most cases, what we're dealing with there are cases that have already matured to the point where parties are at issue with each other. A lot of the times, what the court system really wants to do is keep cases out of it. And the technologies that exist that are being used in many respects will help prevent disputes from even taking place. And so there are opportunities to access technologies that are being developed in a lot of different sectors and use them in such a way to either ease the burdens on the court system when cases are there. Maybe you don't need to actually show up in a courtroom. Maybe there are ways to have virtual types of presentations, but the rules of the court need to allow that. But in other cases, we're focusing more on the preventive side of things. How can you use technology to help people help themselves at the early stages? And that's where opportunities exist, especially when we attract in the young technology geeks, so to speak, and bring them in and work with people who've been trained in the justice sector over the course of time, and together look at a problem and then say, are there alternative ways to solve the problem? And in many cases, technologies are already out there that are being used in other areas that can be repurposed. And in some cases, we'd be developing new technologies. But that's the idea, and that's what David and I started brainstorming when we began talking about how could we gather this group together and get them working.
So before we proceed on, let me let listeners know who are tuned in that you are listening to the Texas Conflict Coach Blog Talk Radio program, and we are talking with David Slayton and Jeff Aresty as part of our Cyber Week special series this week. And it's about accessing justice, the tech for justice, and how do we leverage existing resources, how do we repurpose technology that already exists to not only educate those who are not accessing justice, but to help them to help themselves with particular problems that they're dealing with. And like you said, kind of how do we do this from the preventative end, addressing conflict early on, and really around kind of engaging the technologists that are out there more in the justice system so that we can start creating better tech. Now, is there an example, another specific example about existing technology, for example, that might be repurposed, or another example like the Foster one that you just gave, David? Either of you, Jeff, or yeah.
One of the things that's been done in Minnesota, I'm aware of a specific thing there where, one of the issues that even Texas has is, and many states do, as our elderly, we're seeing what's being referred to as a silver tsunami, where I know the population of Texas over 65 is supposed to double between now and 2050. We're seeing the baby boomers entering the over 65 range, and we know that with people living longer and staying around with us even longer, the fact is that many of these individuals may get to the point where they're not able to make decisions on their own and may need access to a guardian and someone to help them make decisions. But at the same time, we want to make sure that those individuals, when they have someone who has the ability to make decisions for them, both financially and even living arrangements many times, we want to make sure that those individuals are being monitored to make sure there's no exploitation or neglect going on. But obviously, in order to do that with a growing population, that would mean adding more and more people to sort of court payrolls to go out and check on these individuals. And the thought is there a way to do this from a tech perspective? And so what Minnesota has done, and really interesting, is used existing technology that's out there and repurposed it to where they can take financial information that's being provided by guardians, reports to the court that are required already in paper form by courts, and they've basically made it where that information is being provided electronically to the courts. And then they've developed an algorithm that actually goes through and checks those reports and is able to identify potential problem areas or red flags where it requires further attention by the court. And this, of course, is a good thing because, with the tremendous number of cases we have in our court system, it's not always possible to keep an eye, 100% on every one of these cases and being able to review them to the level of detail we would like. So if we're able to see areas where we ought to maybe go check, and using that technology to help us, having the computer help us think through and spot problems is certainly a way that we're able to leverage technology to make our service to the public and make sure that individuals who are elderly are protected. These are just a few of the examples of things that really technology can really help us with, and that's another example of that.
Of course, Patty, the mobile phone is filled with applications and opportunities for use in this sector. The key part of it that we can think about is that the mobile phone really makes all of our lives transparent. Now, I understand that we're going to always be addressing issues of privacy and security. They have to be dealt with at every level. But having said that, we all, as individuals, make choices. We make decisions about what is expedient for our purposes. And if in the right circumstance we want to record digitally what is taking place, we see examples of it now every day on the news. These kinds of situations, the opportunity to record things digitally can be used in a lot of settings. In a recent hackathon that we were involved with in San Francisco, that we want to do again here in Austin in the coming months, is the area of cyberbullying. And you can think of all kinds of opportunities for not only recording information, but also using the cell phones as a way to build networks of people who are sharing information and are connected with each other in such a way so that you stop problems from developing before they get into a real serious problem. The phone itself is a real learning tool. I found it, interestingly enough, when I traveled overseas to Afghanistan, that the phone was used really as a place for a radio show like you're having here. We're on internet radio. They were way ahead of this curve a few years ago, and they would gather around and listen to essentially what amounted to a talk show around legal rights as it related to land disputes. So it's a fascinating opportunity to use the phone itself and to develop applications that are specific to addressing legal concerns that have been identified by David and others in the judicial system.
Another one, and this is just sort of an interesting one that we've seen is, and it's really technology and it's the technology sector really coming up with its own. One of the age-old issues, if you think back to some of the mortgage foreclosure issues of a few years back, one of the real concerns was, service and making sure that we're monitoring individuals being served properly with lawsuits. And one of the things that happened in Texas is we had our e-filing system that's now mandatory in a number of our counties across the state. And one particular vendor said, we should use technology to really be processing returns of service electronically and making sure that we can get that information back to the court promptly with a easy access chain to figure out where it came from and make sure it's been done. And so they developed a mobile application on a phone that literally as soon as they serve the document upon the other party, they can hit a button and it within seconds of the person being served, that information is provided back to the court. This, of course, used to take weeks in many instances to get that information back to the court, and all of a sudden that's now down to a matter of seconds. So it's just things like this that technology can really help us make the court system more efficient and more effective.
Well, I appreciate you anchoring with several examples, because when we talk about technology, for some people it's just like, so elusive, and so, behind this, it's like the person who knows how to drive the car and then the person who really knows what's underneath the car and what makes it work. And that can be scary for a lot of people, technology. And so I have a couple of follow-up questions. Before I do that, I just want to thank the folks who are coming into the chat room. And if you have questions or comments, feel free to do that there, and I'll bring them into the show. So one thing about the apps, and then I have a question about resistance, because when you were talking, Jeff, about the cyberbullying, and you might know about this app, the Stop Bullying app that was actually developed by a guy here in San Antonio. I don't know if you're familiar with that, which is connected to the networks and systems in the schools.
Yes, I've heard about it, but you should explain it to everybody.
Well, the Stop Bullying app, he was actually on the show last year, and his last name is Porter, no relation to me, and he very much a technologist, and developed a program that was anonymous so that kids could be in the school, could be reporting what they were observing anonymously, but it would go to certain people in the school who could see if there was a pattern going on, but that way if they were a bystander, for example, they felt like they had an active role in reporting this behavior, and then the app is connected to a number of sources also in the community so that it could respond to it quickly, but that people felt safe, and it would increase the ability to access, if you will, the ability to let the adults know without them feeling fearful that they were going to get in trouble or be, at the end of that. So that was won a number of awards, and that reminded me of one of the apps you were talking about. But I want to go back to, the technology, because especially with the older population, and not to stereotype in any way because I'm getting up there my age myself, is this resistance to the use of technology, and it's changing so quickly with the apps and everything you can imagine. So here you have, when I think of resistance, I think of it too. I think of it as the resistance of the user. So if you're talking about the vulnerable population, you're talking about those who are powerless, who may or may not even have access to technology, computers, or even smartphones. That's that angle. But then is there resistance from the folks working in the justice system who is either afraid of technology, doesn't want to learn technology, or even go in that direction? So can you kind of address that?
I'll start by addressing at least the resistance within the judiciary. And in Texas, just this year, we've gone to mandatory e-filing in a number of our counties, our courts across the state, and there's certainly been some quick adopters, early adopters who jumped right on board from the judge's perspective and said, "Oh, we can operate in an electronic environment, and it's going to be great." And there are certainly those who are more resistant to that and still prefer to have the paper files and dealing with things that way. What's been really interesting, though, is that what we've seen is as individuals are willing to try technology and try it out and actually experiment with it, even those who've been resistant to it quickly become big fans of it because they realize how much more efficient it can make them and how much easier their job really does become, and how really it gives them the opportunity to work from anywhere whenever they want and have the access to the information they need. So it's interesting. There certainly is that resistance, and part of it is just trying to get them comfortable with the technology, get them educated about what they can do with it, and then really get them to trying it and using it. And I think that's not unusual with anybody, but it's certainly been the experience we've had with judges and individuals inside the judiciary. If you look at our Texas Supreme Court, all of them are operating in a paperless environment. The Supreme Court here even drafts opinions completely electronically. It never hits paper. And so, at the highest court here with individuals and justices here who've been serving on the bench for a long time, many of them, they've found that technology can really be something that's a useful tool to them, and they've been using it effectively.
That is certainly the case here in Texas with our Chief Justice really being considered an innovator throughout the country. And one of the things that's happening is that as Chief Justices begin to set the message that we're not waiting any longer, we're going to start moving in a direction where technology is going to allow us to work with other groups, technologists, young people who just grow up with the technology, to invent new ways to create opportunities for justice. Then every lawyer, every mediator, every court clerk, everybody who's involved with the justice system is going to need training. That's, in fact, what we're finding as we create basic training courses at Internet Bar Organization. We're finding a lot of people are finally taking the courses, and they're finally realizing it's time to use it. You've seen it, of course, in banking, where 6 years ago many people would say, "I'm never leaving the paper check book behind. I'm always going to use it. I'll always have a paper check register." And those same people today wouldn't think twice about the fact that online banking is the only way that they're operating. It may take some time, but with the proper leadership, and we have it here in Texas, and hopefully that will lead to some exciting opportunities as we build towards our hackathons, where this will lead the change.
Well, and we're going to talk about those hackathons. So talk from the other perspective about the resistance to those who are vulnerable and powerless, because I'm imagining that some of these folks, either don't have access to computers or smartphones, have not been educated on how to use the computer. So if we're going in the direction of using technology to increase access, it sounds like there might be a gap educationally around technology for them as well. So what is your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's really important, Patty, that we always remember that there are going to be individuals who are seeking to access our court systems who may not have that knowledge base or even the tools to be able to do that. So we have to be able to provide methods to allow them to access the court. So I'll just give you an example of that here in Texas, some of our courts, some of our clerks' offices realize that there may be some individuals who are seeking to access the court systems and represent themselves who may not have access to computers to do electronic filing but may want to do that. And so they've provided access terminals at the courthouse to do it. And then they still, our court system here in Texas said, we're going to mandate e-filing, but we're going to also allow individuals who are representing themselves to still file paper if that's something that they need to do. So there's multiple, they may be able to either electronically file it from their home, they can electronically file it from the clerk's office, or they can bring in paper in that instance. And so, I think we probably, at least for some time, won't ever be able to get past the perspective of realizing the individuals that are out there are going to have different levels of access to resources to be able to do that, and we've got to keep that in mind even when we're building out technology. I think the other thing that's important to remember is whatever technology is developed, and this is, I think, something really important for all of us who are working on the Tech for Justice thing to remember, is that we've got to have tools that are really simple to use and are intuitive in how that you interact with them, because if it's too complicated, then obviously we're not providing any better access than what the court system offers now. And so making sure that whatever those tools are, and that's honestly one of the reasons why bringing the technology sector on board and on sort of the inside of developing these is so important, because probably the majority of them don't have a lot of experience with the justice system, and so they're going to want to write it and think about it from a perspective of simplicity and under something that's easy for people to understand, and that's something that we're really excited about. But I think those things are really important to remember, that, yeah, you're right, there are going to be people who don't have the experience. I always say we've got this, Jeff's used the word digital natives and digital immigrants. We've got what I refer to as a digital divide. Right now in our society, we've got really people at both ends of the spectrum here. We've got the natives and the immigrants, and we've got to make sure our court system is able to respond to both of those groups, and keeping those things in mind is really important.
Yeah, I think that is very important, because I can see, definitely going in the technology. We need to go into the technology arena, bringing that in, because the intent is, as you said, to leverage that and to gain more access. And ironically, if we're not careful, we can inadvertently make sure people, especially in the silver tsunami, who don't use computers, afraid to use computers, and all of a sudden they have no access because now everything is computerized and technology. So it's that balance in making sure that we're still, encouraging that. I know, Jeff, you have a comment, but I was working with an individual, older individual, and for the first time ever, just within a few weeks, months, maybe 3 months, got her first email. Never did email, only communicated by fax or phone. And so there was no technology, there was no computer, and so I imagine there's a lot of folks out there, in that same boat. So just wanted to see where y'all were with that. Jeff, you were going to add something to that too.
Much just supporting what David was saying. User interface design is absolutely critical in all of the developments. This has to be simple. There have to be ways in which we address each population and motivate them. I certainly have seen in rest homes and so forth, incredible use of computer rooms, Skype, talking with grandkids, people getting emails. So, if we do the right thing, if we think through in our models how we can make sure that people have access, whether it's to the phones, where I think the justice system is going to ultimately be accessible through the mobile phone. As you look around the world, everybody is accessing the mobile phone. They're accessing systems in the cloud. That's a direction that a lot of people are moving in. Of course, the justice system has been struggling with that. But that's where everybody's moving. So we have to address that, and yet at the same time as we address it, and there'll be resistance to it, the education and the simplicity of design and the listening that we have to do to make sure that we're acknowledging the needs of people is going to be critically important to the adoption.
Oh, absolutely. So tell us more about the hackathon, the Tech for Justice hackathon. You've mentioned you've had one before. What is that? What are you looking for folks that are listening in? Say more about that.
Jeff, go ahead. I know you've done some of this stuff before, so please share what we're doing.
Well, the Internet Bar Organization ran a hackathon at Code for America in San Francisco in conjunction with a program out there at Stanford Law School, UC Hastings Law School. It was really our pilot hackathon. I then went to another hackathon that was run by the American Bar Association this summer, and there have been a couple others as well. So we've had a good opportunity to see how the multidisciplinary communities can be brought together. You bring judges, you bring lawyers, you bring system designers, you bring academics, you bring anybody who's interested in justice together, and you give them a set of problems to work on. And the hackathon concept is that you bring people together, you put them in a room over the course of 2 days, and they will come up with solutions to problems that are presented to them. Cyberbullying was a problem that was presented in San Francisco, and people came up with innovative ideas that then were going to be developed subsequently. But that's when David and I sat down and had a conversation when I came back and started meeting with the Office of Court Administration, the Texas Legal Services Center, and then also Legal Services Corporation out of D.C. And the thought that was raised was, well, this is great. We get people together for a couple of days, and we have some really great ideas, but then what happens? People go away, and we really need to have solutions to problems. So together we brainstormed and came up with this idea of a Hackathon Plus is what we're calling it, which is that we would have a couple-day hackathon in conjunction with the Office of Court Administration, the Texas Judicial Council, because they have the knowledge of what cases need the most attention. They know where the problems are, and they know where we need to focus attention. And they can present those ideas, they can present those concerns, and we can bring in a multidisciplinary community of people to gather. And then what we can say to these people is that not only will you be able to work with us over the course of a couple of days, but we will judge these ideas based not only on how neat and great the idea is, but also from a practical standpoint, can it be implemented? What kind of business models would be associated with the implementation of this model? How broad of a reach could this application realize in the case of the community? And we will judge, and then on an ongoing basis, the top of the applications will get ongoing mentorship. There may be opportunities to bring in venture capitalists and entrepreneurs to take a look at these applications, because social justice applications, like any other mobile phone application, have a business utility and a business marketplace that could fund the development of these applications. In other words, there's the opportunity for jobs to be created, and that might get the technology sector very interested in showing up. We also provide direct access to the stakeholders, to the judicial system itself, to the people who are handling these cases, the judges, the lawyers, the mediators, the court clerks, everybody who knows how these cases are running, so that as we're developing the applications, we'd create this feedback loop that would go back and forth so these ideas could be tested. And ultimately, if it's done well enough, the incubator, which does have a history in the country, and in particular here in Houston in the energy sector and in the technology sector, it could ultimately lead to financial resources for the development of some of these applications. So we're going to be having a hackathon February 21 and 22 in 2015 in conjunction with the Texas Judicial Council meetings, which I think will conclude just before that, so that we can give the opportunity to the people most interested in justice in Texas the opportunity to see how this is going to work.
So that's February 21st and 22nd, which I believe is a Friday, Saturday, I believe, or Saturday, Sunday, something like that over the weekend?
Saturday, Sunday is the
Okay, and
that's
going to be in Austin?
In Austin, Texas. We're planning to hold it at the Capitol Factory right near the State House.
Okay, at the Capitol Factory. Okay, and are you already connected to technologists, or are you asking listeners who might be in the technology sector that they're invited to come, or?
We're going to get the message out. If people come to your website after this program, they can go to our website, internetbar.org, and they'll see a Tech for Justice tab at the top, and if they click on that, they'll see the Tech for Justice Austin link, and when they go there, there's a big icon there that says, if you want to participate, just click here, and it will take you to an Eventbrite page, and people can just register, and for free, they'll be on our mailing list, and we'll send out information to get people involved, and people can just watch. People can start forming teams. We're just in the beginning process of putting this information out there, but that is there. They can also become members of Internet Bar if they want to, and start taking some courses and training. There's a register button if they would like to register and become a member and join and become a dues-paying member. They can do that. They'll also be members, but you can just indicate your interest in participating for free, and we're happy to get your interest and involvement, and hope you'll start joining us in the effort.
All right, so folks, you have your call to action, and go to the internetbar.org. It is a nonprofit group, and as Jeff just mentioned, there's a number of ways to do that on the tab there. So the Tech for Justice Hackathon is scheduled in Austin, Texas, February 21st and 22nd. And once you register to get information as it develops, it'll be coming on. And I'll also update your program page to include that information as well now that you have the date set. And that will be a 2-day event, a free event as I understand it, to get people together from the various sectors. So like you said, you can leverage those resources. Also, to learn more about technology and online dispute resolution, Cyber Week has been going on all week, and if you missed any of the events, you can go back and listen to the recordings, listen to the show. That's at adrhub.com, and you'll see a tab there for Cyber Week of 2014. David, did you have any other additional call to action before we go into our closing comments?
I think the thing that's really important is we, want people to begin to think about what role they play in the justice system. And if you're someone out there who has a technology background and you're thinking, I don't really play a role in the justice system, we want you to know that you are indeed a part of the system, and so we'd like for you to get involved with us and consider being a part of the Tech for Justice Hackathon in the spring, and maybe coming and thinking about what contribution you might be able to provide in the system.
Now, if they wanted to reach out, folks want to reach out to you, each of you specifically, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, they could certainly reach out to me by email. My email address is, I believe, available, but it's david.slayton@txcourts.gov, and I'd be happy to communicate with anyone who's interested.
And Slayton is Slayton. Okay, and Jeff, what about you? Is that through the Internet Bar or somewhere another source?
Sure, no. My email address is Jeff Aresty at internetbar.org. And yes, we are most interested. We are excited about having people get involved. We'll have many different ways for people to get involved in our Tech for Justice projects. In some ways, people can participate for free. In other ways, we'll be encouraging people to participate and support the effort. So we'll have many different ways for people to get in and be part of this part of the project. And we look forward to getting everybody involved. This is an incredible opportunity. We have worked so many years in the technology sector but it's rare to have the top level of the judicial system to be behind this project because that's where the action happens. And so I'm very thankful to David Slayton. I'm thankful to Randy Chapman of the Texas Legal Services Center, who really saw the opportunities and made the connections for us. So this is where our outreach goes through you, Patty, and you've been great, and the Texas Association for Mediators to make the connections out to the broadly based justice community to say the time for change is here and everybody can play. So we're looking forward to everybody joining in.
That's great. And folks, again, if you're trying to email Jeff, his last name is Aresty, Jeff Aresty at internetbar.org. All right. As we begin to close now, are there any final messages that you would like to leave with our listeners? We have several people in the chat room, so again, everyone, thank you for being part of our show tonight live in the chat room and also in the Twitter feed. So, Jeff and David, you have the last word.
Well, thank you, Patty, so much for drawing attention to something that is really close and dear to my heart, which is making sure that we provide good access to the justice system to those who need it, and for thinking about having everyone think a little bit about what role they might play in making the justice system more efficient through the use of technology during this Cyber Week. So thank you so much for your efforts and for everyone listening in today, and hopefully everyone will give that some thought about how they can get involved.
Great, thank you.
And I echo what David said. We're building this justice layer of the Internet. This is our time to do it. We have the opportunity to bring all generations, all cultures together around these the needs of the vulnerable and the powerless, and what a great place to start. And thanks, Patty, for giving us the opportunity to share our message to the crowd at Cyber Week.
Oh, absolutely, and we'll continue to support you through all our social media networks, especially as things continue to develop. So again, thank you everyone for participating as part of Cyber Week, and thank you listeners for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you've enjoyed the program. You can find over 300 podcasts archived to listen at your own convenience at texasconflictcoach.com. or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. To learn about upcoming radio programs and resources, sign up for our monthly e-newsletter.